Maya Chen sat quietly at her post, her eyes fixed through the lens of her binoculars. The rugged, mountainous terrain stretched out before her, jagged ridges and narrow valleys creating the perfect environment for ambush. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the land. There was no sound, no movement, except for the occasional rustle of the wind through the rocks. In the distance, the faint noise of her team's vehicles could be heard as they advanced on their target. Maya remained motionless, her rifle resting across her lap, her gaze never wavering from the landscape before her. Every minute that passed felt like an eternity, but Maya was unfazed. She had been trained for moments like this. She was ready. Her role was clear: secure the perimeter, maintain vigilance, and wait for the call from Captain Reeves. Maya was the only one in the team tasked with watching over the unit's flank, a position that some might consider secondary or even mundane. But Maya understood the importance of her duty. While her team moved forward on their high-stakes mission, it was her watchfulness that would keep them safe. It wasn't glamorous, but it was essential. The hum of her radio broke the silence, a crackle followed by the steady voice of Captain Reeves. "Sierra team, radio check," he said, his voice clear but distant. Maya responded immediately, her tone crisp and professional. "Sierra Actual, this is Chen. Perimeter secure," she reported, her voice calm despite the weight of the responsibility she carried. Her job was simple, yet it carried immense consequences. If anything went wrong, she would be the first line of defense. She took a slow sip from her canteen, her eyes never leaving the valley below. The heat from the midday sun began to fade as the afternoon wore on, but the tension in the air was thick, unrelenting. Maya had been in this position for over 6 hours, a silent sentinel waiting for any sign of trouble. The hours dragged by, the landscape unchanged, the silence stretching out like an endless void. But Maya knew better than to let her guard down. The smallest lapse in focus could be catastrophic. As the minutes passed, Maya's mind wandered, briefly reflecting on the events that had brought her here. She remembered the brief before the mission began, when Captain Reeves had gathered the team to assign roles. He had looked at each of them with a tactical precision, choosing who would infiltrate, who would provide security, and who would manage communications. But when his gaze landed on Maya, the only woman in the unit, his expression had shifted ever so slightly. "Chen," he had said, with a glance that seemed almost dismissive, "you'll guard the perimeter at the ridge. Keep your eyes open." Maya had straightened her back, her spine rigid with a sense of duty. "Sir, with respect, I'd like to volunteer for the infiltration team. My marksmanship scores are the highest in the unit," she had said, her voice steady, filled with conviction. But Captain Reeves had barely looked at her. "Someone needs to guard the perimeter. Specialist. That will be you," he had said, dismissing her request with barely a glance. The memory stung, but Maya quickly shook it off. She had heard this kind of dismissal before, and it only fueled her determination to prove herself. She had spent countless hours at the range, honing her skills, training to be the best. Her marksmanship was flawless, her focus unshakable, but for now, her role was clear. She would stay here, watch, and wait. The radio crackled again, this time with a report from Sergeant Thompson. "Sierra Actual, extraction team is en route. E to 40 minutes, he said, his voice filled with relief. Maya's grip on her rifle tightened as she checked her watch. They were close now, but the real danger had not yet arrived. She knew the terrain like the back of her hand. If there was trouble, it would come soon. She returned to her observations, scanning the ridgelines through her scope. Every detail, every movement was catalogued in her mind. A sudden flash of movement caught her attention, too subtle to be an animal, too deliberate to be random. Her finger tightened on the trigger, but she didn't shoot. Not yet. She had to be sure. She zoomed in, adjusting the lens of her scope. Then she saw a glint of metal in the afternoon sun. Quickly concealed by the rocks, someone was out there. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end as she counted the positions, her mind racing. At least 3 hostiles, maybe more. This wasn't just a random encounter, it was an ambush. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. Her mind raced through the possibilities. The team was due to pass through that narrow corridor in less than 15 minutes. She knew they couldn't afford to miss this. Maya immediately transmitted a message, her voice cool and controlled despite the rising tension. "Sierra Actual, this is Chen. Possible movement on the South Ridge. Over." There was a brief pause before Captain Reeves's irritated voice crackled through the comms. "Chen, maintain radio silence unless it's an emergency. We've already swept that area." Maya's jaw clenched, but she held her ground. She had been trained to trust her instincts, and right now, those instincts were screaming at her to act. Sierra Actual. This is Chen. I'm seeing multiple indicators of possible hostiles on your approach route. Recommend immediate route change. Over. The radio crackled with static. She tried again on different channels, but the result was the same, nothing but dead air. The comms were jammed. Maya's pulse quickened. But she stayed calm. She knew this situation. This wasn't just a random attack, it was planned. The enemy had anticipated the team's movements. Maya quickly gathered her gear, securing her rifle across her back. She marked her position with a tactical pack and secondary equipment, a clear sign for any friendly forces that might pass by that she had temporarily relocated. She didn't wait for orders, she was already moving. The landscape was treacherous, but Maya was prepared. She had trained for this, studied every inch of the terrain. Her movements were swift but deliberate, each step calculated to avoid making a sound. Time was running out. Her teammates were just moments away from walking straight into an ambush, and she was the only one who could stop it. As she neared the ridge, the distant sound of gunfire reached her ears. The ambush had begun. Maya pushed herself harder, her heart pounding as she raced to intercept the enemy and save her team. In that moment, Maya didn't just hear the gunfire. She felt it, the weight of responsibility, the urgency of the situation, the knowledge that every decision she made in the next few minutes could mean life or death for her teammates. She was ready. She had always been ready for this moment. Maya Chen was no longer just a guard on the perimeter. She was the one who would save them all. The briefing had started like any other mission. Captain Reeves stood at the front of the command tent, his voice steady as he pointed at the tactical map. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, a mix of adrenaline and focus. The mission was high priority, a risky extraction operation in hostile territory. Maya had been at these briefings before, ready to contribute, eager to prove her worth. Her mind was already running through the tactical options, analyzing the best routes and the potential threats the team might face. But when the time came to assign roles, her heart sank. Reeves began assigning team members to specific tasks. Mitchell, Rodriguez, Dawson, and Jackson, all seasoned veterans, were chosen for the most critical roles. Mitchell and Rodriguez would handle the primary infiltration. Jackson was tasked with security, and Thompson would take over communications. The team was experienced, well prepared, and ready to execute the mission. It was clear that Reeves trusted them completely. When the gaze of the captain finally fell on Maya, the moment felt like a punch to the gut. He paused. Just for a second, maybe a flicker of doubt passed over his face, but then he spoke. "Chen, you'll guard the perimeter. Keep an eye on the ridge overlooking the valley. We'll need eyes on that approach." Maya stood still, her back straight, but the words hit her harder than she expected. Guard the perimeter. She had been with the unit for over a year, trained rigorously, outperforming her peers in marksmanship, land navigation, and tactical exercises. Yet, here she was, being assigned to watch over the same dull stretch of ground while the rest of the team got the glory. It felt like a slap in the face. "Sir, with all due respect," Maya spoke up, her voice steady, but a tightness in her chest threatened to break through. "I'd like to volunteer for the infiltration team. My marksmanship scores are the highest in the unit. I can provide support if needed." Reeves barely looked at her as he turned back to the map. He didn't even acknowledge her suggestion. "Someone needs to guard the perimeter. Specialist. That will be you." The words stung, more than she expected. She swallowed the frustration, the anger that welled up inside her. She had worked so hard, trained relentlessly, and yet here she was, sidelined. A simple task like perimeter security, a task that was often considered a secondary duty. But Maya didn't argue. She simply nodded, forced a professional expression, and said, "Yes, sir." She had learned early on in her military career that speaking out too much, showing frustration, wouldn't get her anywhere. She had to keep moving forward, no matter how unfair the situation seemed. She would do her job, and she would do it well. The thought of being left out, of not getting a chance to prove herself in the field, burned in the back of her mind. But it wasn't the right moment to express that. She would bide her time. As the briefing concluded, she fell into line with the others. The team members were excited, joking amongst themselves, making plans for after the mission. Maya kept quiet, not participating in their camaraderie. She never was invited into their circles, always on the outside looking in. While they exchanged friendly banter, she focused on the mission. On the task ahead, her mind was already running through the procedures for securing the perimeter. Later that night, as the team prepared to move out, Maya found herself alone at her post, scanning the rugged landscape through her binoculars. The moonlight cast long, eerie shadows over the valley. making the terrain feel more treacherous than it already was. It was silent, too silent. Her grip on the rifle across her lap tightened as she adjusted her position, slightly, her eyes never leaving the jagged ridgelines ahead. The hours passed slowly. Her body ached from the uncomfortable sitting position, but she didn't move. She was here to ensure the team's safety, and that was all that mattered. But as she sat there, Maya's thoughts wandered back to the briefing, to Reeves's dismissive tone, his choice to leave her behind. The words echoed in her mind, someone needs to guard the perimeter. She had trained her entire life for more than this. She had always dreamed of being on the front lines, making a difference, being part of something greater. Instead, she was left alone to watch over a patch of ground. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but Maya knew she couldn't afford to let it show. She needed to maintain her professionalism. There was a reason she had been chosen for this role, and she would give it her all. Even if it didn't feel like the recognition she deserved, Maya thought of her grandfather, Master Sergeant William Chen, who had been a legendary marksman in the Special Forces. He had taught her everything she knew about precision shooting and patience. He had told her that the best soldiers weren't always the ones in the spotlight, but the ones who could see what others missed. Maya had always believed that. But tonight, the doubt crept in. Was it really enough to be the one who sees what others miss, if no one ever gave you the chance to prove it? The radio crackled, pulling her from her thoughts. "Sierra team, radio check," came the voice of Captain Reeves. Maya responded immediately, her voice as steady as ever. "Sierra Actual. This is Chen. Perimeter secure," she reported, her voice betraying nothing of her internal frustration. She didn't want to be the one holding down the fort. She wanted to be where the action was, where her skills could make the biggest difference. She took a slow sip of water from her canteen, her eyes scanning the ridgelines again. Nothing moved, not a single shadow. It was as if the entire valley was holding its breath. It had been hours since her team moved out, and she had not heard a peep from anyone. The silence felt oppressive. Maya could feel her body starting to tense as she settled deeper into her post. There was a small part of her that thought she might be forgotten here, left behind in this isolated position, while the others took part in the mission's true purpose. She wasn't sure when the disappointment would turn into something worse, resentment. Maybe she couldn't let herself feel that. Though, not here. Not now. The moment she allowed herself to feel sorry for herself, the moment she became distracted by personal feelings, it would be over. That's what her training had taught her. Distraction was death. And so, she stayed in place, her movements precise, methodical, and calm. The hours wore on, but Maya was not just guarding the perimeter. She was fighting her own battle against the sting of being overlooked, against the frustration of being forced into a role she hadn't chosen, but one she would do with the same level of dedication and skill she had given. Every other mission before this, even if it meant being forgotten, even if it meant remaining invisible, Maya would prove, in her own quiet way, that she was more than just a guard on the perimeter. She was a soldier, capable of anything. The night stretched on, the darkness pressing in around her. But Maya stayed focused. The team's safety was in her hands now, and that was all that mattered. Maya adjusted the focus on her scope, narrowing in on the valley ahead. The sun was beginning to dip behind the mountain range, casting a dusky, purple hue over the land. Silence reigned. But Maya knew better than to be lulled into a false sense of security. She had been trained to see what others missed, to detect subtle changes in the environment that signaled danger. Her eyes scanned the jagged ridgelines once more. Every angle, every shift in the landscape now burned into her mind. Then she saw it. A slight shift in the rocks, a movement too deliberate to be natural, the kind of movement that meant someone was hiding, waiting. Maya's pulse quickened, her hand tightening around her rifle. It was almost imperceptible, but it was there, a glint of metal catching the fading light, quickly concealed as if someone had just moved. Maya held her breath, shifting her position slightly, keeping the rifle steady across her lap. Her focus sharpened. The terrain was treacherous, with narrow paths and jagged rocks that made it the perfect place for an ambush. Her eyes flicked to the time on her watch her team would be coming through. This narrow pass in less than 15 minutes. She scanned again, this time more deliberately, and her suspicions were confirmed. There were more signs, subtle shifts in the dust, the unnatural stillness of the birds that had been flying nearby. Something wasn't right. She adjusted her position again, trying to get a clearer view of the ridge. And there it was. More movements, this time larger. Figures were shifting behind rocks, trying to stay out of sight. Maya's heart raced. They were setting up positions, preparing for a kill zone. There were at least 4, maybe 5 positions she could make out through her scope, all of them trained on the valley below. The enemy was waiting for her team to walk right into their trap. Her fingers were already on the radio, dialing in the frequency for the team's communications channel. Her voice was calm as she transmitted, "Sierra Actual. This is Chen. Possible movement on the South Ridge. Over." She waited, watching the ridge through her scope, her finger still resting lightly on the transmit button. Nothing. The silence of the radio was unnerving. After a long moment, the static crackled, and Captain Reeves's voice came through, a touch of irritation in his tone. "Chen, maintain radio silence unless it's an emergency. We've already swept the area." Maya's teeth clenched. She knew her job, and she knew when something was off. This wasn't just a casual shift in the environment. This was an organized ambush. She had seen it before. She took a deep breath and tried again. "Sierra. Actual. This is Chen. I'm seeing multiple indicators of hostiles on your approach route. Recommend immediate route change. Over." There was a long pause this time. Maya's hand tightened on the rifle, her knuckles turning white. No response. She clicked the radio off and turned it over in her hands, cursing under her breath. The team was close now, only minutes away from the choke point where they were vulnerable. Her thoughts raced, every second counted. She couldn't afford to wait for orders. Not this time. Maya stood up, her movements calculated, deliberate. She glanced around the barren ridge, looking for any signs of movement. It was now or never. She wasn't about to let her team walk into a trap because they wouldn't listen. Without another thought, she slipped her rifle into its sling and grabbed her pack, making sure to mark her position clearly with a piece of equipment that would signal her temporary absence for anyone passing by. She would make her move. The terrain was rough, rocky, and steep, but Maya was well versed in moving silently through such conditions. She dropped to the ground, keeping low, her body close to the jagged earth. Every step was measured to avoid dislodging stones or making any sound. The enemy could be anywhere hidden in those rocks, waiting for the right moment to strike. Her heart raced, but her mind was focused. She had one goal now: to stop the ambush before it happened. Her body moved instinctively, the countless hours of training taking over as she advanced toward the ridge. Maya had always been patient, but there was no time for hesitation now. The team was counting on her. Minutes passed, but Maya kept her pace steady, her breathing controlled. The ridge was getting closer. She could hear the faint echoes of her team's approach, the hum of their vehicles as they neared the narrow pass. Maya checked her watch. 5 minutes to go. It wasn't enough time. She could already hear the faint sound of automatic gunfire in the distance, signaling that the ambush had begun. She quickened her pace, her focus never wavering from the mission. She had trained for this. Every footstep, every decision was calculated. The fear she might have felt at one point was gone. All that remained was the mission. She had no time to second-guess herself. Her team needed her, and she would deliver. Maya crept up to the ridge's edge, careful not to expose herself too soon. She scanned the area with her binoculars first, her eyes moving over the ridgeline, picking out the enemy positions. There were 10, maybe more. They were well placed, covering every possible escape route for her team. They weren't just insurgents, they were skilled, military trained. This was no random ambush. She pulled out her rifle, slinging it into place, and took a moment to steady herself. The wind was picking up, and it would make her shots more difficult. But she was prepared. Her grandfather's lessons echoed in her mind. See what others miss. This was her time to shine, her chance to prove herself not just to the team, but to herself. The sound of gunfire grew louder, and Maya's heart rate sped up. She moved quickly, positioning herself to get a clean line of sight on the closest enemy. Her hands were steady as she aimed through her scope, her breath even as she squeezed the trigger. The first shot rang out, sharp and precise. The target dropped without a sound. She shifted positions quickly, moving silently to a new vantage point. The enemy would be expecting return fire, but they wouldn't know where it was coming from. She adjusted her aim, her finger slowly applying pressure to the trigger again. Another shot, another enemy down. Maya could hear her heartbeat in her ears now, but she didn't let it break her concentration. This was what she had trained for. The team below was still pinned down, but the fire from the ridge had started to slow. Captain Reeves had likely noticed the change in the firing pattern. Maya was working as fast as she could, picking off the ambushers one by one, shifting her position each time to avoid detection. There was no time to waste. But as she targeted the next enemy, something shifted in the air. Maya felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. She wasn't alone. The enemy was closing in on her position. She scanned the ridge again, catching movement from the corner of her eye. A fighter had broken off from the main group, moving to investigate the source of the sniper fire. Maya didn't hesitate. She swung her rifle toward the new threat, adjusting for the wind and the distance. He was getting closer. She had to act before he realized where she was. Her finger tightened on the trigger. The shot rang out, clean and true. The fighter dropped without a sound, but Maya wasn't out of danger yet. She needed to finish this. She would stop the ambush, no matter what it took. Maya's breath was steady, her movements calculated as she surveyed the ridge from her concealed position. The sound of gunfire below had intensified, signaling that her team was now fully engaged in the ambush. Her heart raced, but her training kicked in, bringing her focus back to the task at hand. She had seen the enemy move into position, but now it was time to take control. She wasn't just a bystander anymore. She was the one who could turn the tide of this battle. Her rifle, the M24 sniper system, felt like an extension of her body as she carefully lined up her first shot. The enemy was just a shadow in her scope, moving cautiously behind the rocks, unaware of the danger they were about to face. Maya exhaled slowly, her finger easing against the trigger. The shot was clean, sharp, and quick. The enemy soldier dropped without a sound, his weapon clattering against the rocks as he crumpled to the ground. Maya shifted position immediately, crawling to a new vantage point behind a jagged outcrop of rock. Her rifle moved with her, kept close to her body to avoid detection. She could hear the muffled voices of her team below, shouting orders and taking cover. They were under heavy fire, but there was no time to worry about them now. Her mission was clear: take out the enemy one by one before they realized where the shots were coming from. She peered through her scope again, scanning the ridge for more targets. There was another enemy soldier, hiding behind a boulder, aiming at her team's flank. He had no idea he was about to become her next target. Maya adjusted her position slightly, aligning her shot with precision. The wind was a factor, but she knew how to account for it. Her breath came steady, and as she squeezed the trigger, she watched the enemy soldier fall. Another shot rang out, and then silence. The field was hers again, but the danger wasn't over. Maya heard the sound of boots crunching on gravel, the unmistakable sign of someone advancing toward her position. She glanced over her shoulder, catching sight of a figure through the rocks. He was moving too fast, unaware that he was walking straight into a sniper's crosshairs. She had no choice but to engage at close range. Maya slid her rifle into its sling and drew her sidearm, a compact 9mm pistol. The movement was swift, deliberate. She pushed herself into a crouch, silently creeping toward the sound of the approaching enemy. Her mind raced through possible outcomes, but her body knew what to do. She had done this hundreds of times before in training, but now it was real. The tension in her muscles was a reminder of how high the stakes were. The enemy soldier appeared, just a few feet away, moving cautiously along the ridge. Maya's eyes locked on him, her pistol raised. Ready. He rounded a boulder, and for a split second, they were face to face. His eyes widened in surprise, and before he could react, Maya closed the distance, diving toward him in a swift motion. She slammed into him, using her shoulder to knock him off balance while simultaneously redirecting his rifle with her left hand. The weapon went flying as they both tumbled to the ground. She was on top of him in an instant, her knee pressing into his chest as she drew her knife. The soldier's breath came in quick gasps as he struggled beneath her, but Maya remained calm. This was the part she had been trained for close-quarters combat. The blade flashed as she made a quick, precise strike, the fight ending before it had truly begun. He collapsed, blood pooling beneath him, and Maya stood over him, her heart beating faster, but still controlled. Without hesitation, she wiped the blade clean on his jacket and stowed it back in her sheath. She didn't look back at the body. There was no time to dwell on it. The battle wasn't over, and her team still needed her. Maya checked her watch. Only a few minutes had passed since the ambush began, but it felt like hours. She moved swiftly, crawling to another vantage point higher up the ridge. The shots from below had slowed, likely because the enemy was realizing that they were being picked off one by one. Maya used their confusion to her advantage. She repositioned again, this time on a higher ledge, where she had a clear view of the entire valley. From this angle, she could see the extraction team, huddled behind cover, their fire steadily returning to the enemy's position. Maya checked the enemy's movements. There were fewer of them now, their fire growing more desperate. They were trying to regroup, but Maya could see the cracks forming in their formation. They weren't coordinated anymore. They were just reacting to her. That's when she spotted the last of them, an experienced-looking fighter, trying to flank her position. He was moving quickly, closing the distance, and Maya was aware that if he got close enough, she'd be in trouble. She adjusted her position yet again, moving to another rock formation that provided cover while still allowing her to track his movements. The fighter was getting closer. Maya raised her rifle, lining up her shot with expert precision. The wind was calm here, and the target was steady. She held her breath and squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out, and the fighter dropped to the ground, his rifle skidding out of his hands. Maya didn't waste a second. She knew there were still others to deal with. She scanned the ridge again, ensuring there were no other hidden threats. Her team had managed to stabilize their position, but they were still under fire, vulnerable. It wasn't over yet. Maya moved one last time, taking advantage of a natural depression in the ridge. She crawled into the position, using the rocks for cover, as the remaining ambushers scrambled to adjust their attack. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger, waiting for the perfect moment. The enemy had started to scatter, trying to reposition in a disorganized attempt to find cover, but Maya knew their movements were now predictable. She picked them off one by one. The sounds of the battle began to shift. The gunfire was less frequent, the shots from the enemy more erratic. Maya's shots were more deliberate, controlled, her every movement a reflection of years of discipline. She wasn't just fighting, she was thinking, analyzing the battlefield, controlling the pace. One final shot rang out, and the last of the enemy soldiers fell. There was a brief moment of stillness, the kind that comes just before the storm fully passes. Maya lowered her rifle, allowing herself to exhale slowly. She wasn't done yet, but the tide had turned. The extraction team had a fighting chance now. Maya stood up, her legs sore from crouching, but her mind was clear. She knew her team was safe for the moment. The battle had been intense, but for Maya, it was just another day in the field and the fight was over. The last enemy soldier had fallen, and the team had regained their footing. But Maya stayed crouched behind the rocks, her eyes scanning the battlefield one final time. Her rifle was slung across her back, and her heart still raced with the adrenaline of battle. But there was no time to reflect. Her mind immediately turned to her team below. She could see them, moving cautiously, making their way to the extraction point. Maya knew that they had made it, but she couldn't help but wonder if the team would even notice what she had done. She had acted decisively. She had saved them from the ambush, taking out multiple enemy positions before they could complete their attack. Yet, as she watched the team regroup below, there was no sign of acknowledgement. No one looked her way. No one shouted her name in relief. Maya remained on the ridge, hidden by the rocks, as the extraction team began their retreat. It wasn't that she expected fanfare. Maya had never been one for attention or recognition. She had always been more comfortable in the background, quietly doing her job, letting her actions speak for themselves. But the silence that followed felt heavy. She had proven her worth, yet no one seemed to care. Her training, her sacrifice, the countless hours spent perfecting her craft, it all felt overlooked in that moment. The team hadn't seen the danger in the first place. She had. She had saved them. Yet there was no sign of gratitude. No one seemed to understand what she had done. Maya stayed in her position, watching as her team made their way to safety. As the sound of their footsteps faded and the dust settled, she allowed herself a moment to breathe. She hadn't lost anyone. The mission had been completed successfully, and that was enough. But the weight of being overlooked, the weight of being invisible, despite everything lingered. The radio crackled, breaking her thoughts. Captain Reeves's voice came through, distant but steady. "Sierra Actual, this is Chen. Extraction point secure. Over." Her tone was professional, but it carried a slight edge, a hint of exhaustion, maybe even frustration, but mostly it was relief. She had done her job. She had done it well. But as the radio fell silent again, Maya couldn't help but feel the sting of dismissal. The team was safe, but she was still on the outskirts. She was the one who had made the difference. But would anyone know that? Would anyone recognize her for it? She didn't expect applause, but a simple acknowledgement. A word of thanks would have meant everything. The quiet was broken once more. But this time, it was the voice of the intelligence asset, the man they had been sent to extract. He approached her, stepping cautiously as if unsure of what to say. Maya remained still, her expression unreadable. He was older, silver-haired, and carried himself with the air of someone who had seen too much. There was a mix of admiration and something else in his gaze as he looked at her. "Specialist Chen," he said, his voice calm, yet tinged with something deeper. "You saved them all today. That was some fine shooting from that ridge." His words were simple, but they hit Maya like a wave. It wasn't the praise of a teammate or a superior officer, but it felt sincere. For a moment, Maya thought she might have heard a hint of respect in his voice. "Thank you, sir," Maya replied, her voice even betraying none of the emotions stirring within her. The thanks she had given in return felt hollow. But it was all she could offer in that moment. She had no interest in basking in compliments. The job was done. Her team was safe. But even so, she couldn't help but feel something shift inside her, a quiet sense of validation. The radio crackled again, but this time, it wasn't Reeves's voice that came through. It was the intelligence asset speaking to the captain, his tone steady but carrying a sense of weight. "Captain, you do realize who this soldier is, don't you?" Maya could hear the faint undertones of surprise, of recognition in his words. There was a pause before Captain Reeves responded, his voice guarded. "What do you mean?" The asset's reply came slowly, but there was a certain respect in his tone now. "Specialist Maya Chen," he began, his words drawing attention. "She's the granddaughter of Master Sergeant William Chen. He saved my unit in Laos during Operation 82. I served with him. That sniper today, that was her. And it was every bit as precise as he was." Maya felt a jolt of surprise that she quickly masked. She had known that her grandfather's legacy followed her, but hearing it spoken aloud like that, it was something else entirely. She had always worked to carve her own path, to be recognized for who she was, not who she was related to. But hearing the asset speak of her grandfather's heroics, of his reputation, made the weight of her own actions feel even heavier. There was a long silence before Reeves spoke again. "Chen, is this true?" His voice was careful, as if he were treading on unfamiliar ground. There was no anger, no disbelief, just an acknowledgement of something Maya had never fully realized. Would matter to others. Something that, perhaps, might finally make her more than just the woman in the background. "Yes, sir," Maya replied, her voice steady but her mind racing. "He taught me everything I know." The asset's words carried even more weight now. "The talent runs in the family, Captain. I remember your grandfather well. He was one of the finest soldiers I ever met. I can say without a doubt, your sniper is cut from the same cloth." There it was, her grandfather's name spoken with reverence. But Maya's eyes remained focused on the ground, on the ridge ahead of her. She didn't want to be defined by him. She wanted to be seen for herself, for her own skills, her own sacrifices. She had earned this moment, but the recognition felt too late. Reeves remained silent for a moment, the weight of the asset's words sinking in. Finally, he spoke, his tone more reflective than Maya had heard before. "You've proven yourself today, Specialist Chen, and I'm sorry I didn't recognize that sooner. You should have been with the team from the start." Maya nodded, but the words didn't feel as powerful as they should. The recognition came too late. The silence that had followed her through her military career wasn't easily undone by a few words from a superior, but it was something. A shift, a crack in the armor of indifference. As the team gathered and prepared to move out, Maya stayed back for a moment, watching as the others spoke and laughed among themselves. She had done her part. The team had made it out alive because of her quick thinking. But it wasn't until the asset had spoken up that anyone truly seemed to understand her value. Reeves approached her again, his face now a mixture of respect and perhaps even some guilt. "Pack up, Chen," he said, his voice firmer now. "You're coming with us. We wouldn't have made it without you." This time, Maya didn't hesitate. She didn't need to prove anything more. She had done what she set out to do, saved her team, and earned her place. She had proved that no matter what anyone thought of her, she was more than capable. And as she shouldered her pack, her eyes met Captain Reeves's gaze, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. "Yes, sir," Maya replied, her voice calm. The journey ahead would be just another mission, but this time she knew something had changed, not just for the team, but for herself. Maya sat quietly at the back of the tactical briefing room, listening as the team discussed the upcoming mission. The room was filled with the familiar buzz of anticipation. Her teammates, the ones who had once been so quick to dismiss her, were now speaking with her in a way that was different, respectful. Even, there were no more jokes at her expense, no more sidelining her. In this room, Maya had earned her place, and she could feel the shift in the atmosphere. It wasn't loud or obvious, but it was there, subtle, yet undeniable. Captain Reeves stood at the front, pointing to the map with a steady hand. His voice was calm, professional as he outlined the operation. The plan was complex, but everyone seemed to understand their role. Moving with precision as they began to prepare, Maya felt the familiar calm wash over her. She had seen this before, the layout of the terrain, the potential threats. But this time, her mind didn't focus on the task at hand alone. It focused on something else, on the subtle way her teammates turned to her for advice, asking her opinion on strategy, on possible angles of approach. It was a small thing, but it mattered. It meant that they were starting to see her not just as the quiet one who had once been assigned to guard the perimeter, but as an equal, a peer. As the briefing continued, Maya's thoughts drifted to the days following the ambush. At first, there had been only silence from the others. She had expected a little acknowledgement, maybe even a simple, "good job." Oh, but it had never come. Reeves had given her a nod, but that was it. The rest of the team had returned to their usual banter, seemingly oblivious to the role she had played in saving them. But over the days that followed, things began to change. Slowly but surely, the team started to understand who she was, not just a marksman, but a soldier, capable of taking charge and leading when necessary. It had started with small things, Rodriguez asking her opinion on a route. During a reconnaissance mission, Jackson looking to her when they discussed tactical maneuvers. They were subtle shifts, but to Maya, they spoke volumes. She had never needed their validation to know her worth. But the quiet shift in how they saw her was a sign that the respect she had, earned through action, was finally sinking in. As Maya leaned forward in her chair, listening carefully, her eyes met Rodriguez's for a brief moment. It was strange to think that only weeks ago, he had been one of the most dismissive of her skills. Now, his glance was one of mutual respect. There was no awkwardness, no condescension in his eyes. She saw the understanding that they were all part of the same team, equal parts of a whole. It felt good, but Maya knew she had earned it through her actions. She didn't need their approval to feel validated, but it was hard to deny the quiet pride that surged within her when they turned to her for answers. The briefing wrapped up, and everyone moved into action, preparing their gear and double-checking their weapons. Maya moved with the group, her mind already shifting into mission mode. This was the moment she was trained for, the moment she could shine in her own right. As the team loaded into the vehicles, Reeves gave the order, and they moved out, heading for their target location. The operation went smoothly, with each team member executing their role flawlessly. Maya's role was clear overwatch and support. The terrain was tricky, with high cliffs and narrow passes, but Maya knew how to use every rock, every shadow to her advantage. She moved swiftly, her focus sharp as she surveyed the area through her scope. The landscape was eerily quiet, almost too quiet, but Maya knew better than to be lulled by the calm. She kept a steady eye on her surroundings, her body tense, prepared for anything. Her thoughts wandered briefly to the changes in the team. She had seen the subtle shift in their perception. But this mission, this operation, was the true test. This was where she would prove once again that she was capable, that she could lead and fight just as effectively as anyone else. She had always known it, but the challenge now was to make her team believe it too. There was a moment during the mission when things didn't go according to plan. An unexpected threat had appeared on their flank, and the team was momentarily pinned down. In that instant, Maya's mind snapped into action. Without hesitation, she relayed tactical information to Reeves, advising him on potential escape routes and calling out enemy positions. Her voice was calm, controlled, no panic, no hesitation. She had done this before, and she would do it again. The team followed her instructions without question. Moving in perfect synchronization, Maya watched as they executed the plan flawlessly, her eyes flicking between her teammates and the enemy positions. Every shot from her rifle was precise, every movement calculated. She didn't just participate in the mission, she took charge when it mattered. It was a moment of realization for her, not just that she could lead, but that the team was following her, trusting her judgment. After the operation was complete, the team gathered again at their safe house, the adrenaline of the mission still coursing through their veins. There was a moment of silence before anyone spoke. But this time, the silence wasn't awkward. It was filled with an understanding, a recognition of what had just been accomplished. Maya could feel the shift, the unspoken respect that had grown between her and her teammates. Rodriguez was the first to speak up. "That was some solid work out there. Chen," he said, his voice genuine. "We couldn't have done it without you." Maya nodded, her eyes meeting his. "Thanks," she said simply. But the weight of his words was not lost on her. This wasn't the same Rodriguez who had dismissed her just weeks ago. This was a teammate, a colleague who recognized her for what she had done, not for her gender or her role in the unit, but for her skills and her ability to lead when it counted. The rest of the team nodded in agreement, each offering their own words of praise. Maya felt the warmth of their recognition. But more than that, she felt something shift within herself. She didn't need their validation to prove her worth. What mattered now was that she had learned to trust herself, to believe in her own abilities without waiting for someone else to tell her. She was capable. That night, as Maya lay in her cot, she thought about everything that had happened, The silent shift in her team's perception, her own growing confidence, and the lessons she had learned along the way. She had proven herself not just to her team, but to herself. She didn't need to be the one at the front of the line, leading every charge. But she had proven that when the time came, she could lead with the same precision and clarity as anyone else. She closed her eyes, the weight of the day settling over her, and for the first time in a long while, she felt at peace with where she was. She had earned her place, not just in the team, but in the world she had chosen, and she knew, deep down, that she was ready for whatever came next. Maya had come a long way from the isolation of her first mission. Over the past few months, her skills had earned the quiet respect of her peers, even if they hadn't been quick to acknowledge it. Her actions in the field spoke volumes, but the camaraderie she'd longed for remained just out of reach. That is, until now. In the wake of the ambush and the pivotal role she'd played in saving her team, Maya's quiet competence began to be recognized, though not immediately. It started with small gestures, subtle changes in the way her teammates interacted with her. A glance here, a nod there. Slowly, they started to see her not as the woman who had been relegated to guarding the perimeter, but as a crucial part of the team. During briefings, when her opinion was solicited, they no longer dismissed her suggestions as they had before. They listened, and Maya found herself speaking up more, her voice steady, her ideas considered with genuine interest. It was a slow process, but it was a shift. She was no longer the outsider. It wasn't just her peers who were noticing. Captain Reeves, who had once brushed aside her requests and ideas, had started to involve her more in tactical decisions. He was no longer just giving orders. He was now asking for her input, seeking her expertise. Maya was finally where she had always wanted to be, not just part of the team, but integral to its operations. This was where she was meant to be leading, strategizing, and making a real difference. But it wasn't just about the recognition. It was the realization that Maya was capable of more than she had ever imagined. She had always known she had the skills, but the self-doubt that had lingered in the back of her mind for so long had clouded her confidence. Now, those doubts were starting to fade. Maya had learned that she didn't need anyone's approval to validate her worth. Her abilities were enough. She was enough. The next mission they were assigned was one that required leadership, and Captain Reeves had no hesitation in assigning Maya to lead a new operation. This mission would see her not just as an operator, but as a leader responsible, for not just executing orders, but for making key decisions on the ground. For the first time, Maya understood that leadership wasn't just about technical expertise. It was about trust, responsibility, and the ability to inspire others. During the pre-mission briefing, Maya stood at the front of the room, her posture confident, her voice clear. She was no longer just the sniper or the guard. She was the one setting the strategy, directing the team, ensuring everyone knew their role and how to execute it. Her teammates Rodriguez, Mitchell, and the others looked to her for guidance, their respect for her now undeniable. Even the young Private Winters, the newest member of their team, sought her advice, eager to learn from the soldier who had led them to success before. Maya had become a mentor to Winters, someone who saw the potential in the young soldier and worked to help her develop the same skills that had served Maya so well. It was a role Maya had never anticipated. She had once been the new recruit, unsure of her place, but now she was the one others looked up to. Winters was just beginning her journey, and Maya saw herself in her. She understood the importance of passing on the lessons she had learned, of ensuring that the next generation of soldiers wouldn't have to fight the same battles she had fought for recognition. The mission itself was high risk, with an objective that required stealth and precision. Maya led her team through rugged terrain, using every bit of her tactical knowledge to guide them. They moved silently through the night, the weight of the operation heavy on their shoulders, but Maya's calm leadership made the difference. She knew exactly what needed to be done, when to take risks, and when to hold back. Her decision-making was quick, decisive, and above all, grounded in experience. As they neared their objective, Maya's thoughts were not just on the mission. She thought about how far she had come. She had started as the overlooked specialist, always on the outside, never considered for the more critical roles. But now, she was leading her team, making life and death decisions, and proving that her abilities were not defined by her gender or her past. She wasn't just a sniper, she was a leader. The operation was a success. The team worked together seamlessly, executing their roles with precision. Maya's leadership had guided them through the mission. But it was the trust they had in each other that made it possible. The respect that had slowly built over time had now solidified into something unbreakable. Back at base, After the mission was complete, Maya took a moment to reflect. She sat alone for a while, allowing herself to process everything. The quiet hum of the base, the sounds of soldiers moving about, seemed distant compared to the chaos of the battlefield. But Maya wasn't lost in the noise anymore. She had found her place. She had become the leader she always knew she could be. When the debriefing was called, Captain Reeves looked at her with a new respect in his eyes. "Well done, Specialist," he said, the weight of the words carrying more than just acknowledgement of the mission's success. It was a recognition of her growth, her transformation from a soldier struggling to be seen into a leader capable of guiding others. As the team gathered around, Maya realized that the respect she had always wanted had come not through recognition or praise, but through her actions. She had earned her place through sheer determination. And now, her teammates were following her not just because they had to, but because they trusted her to lead them. Later, as the team disbanded for the night, Private Winters approached Maya. "Thank you," she said, her voice sincere, "for everything. You've shown me what it means to be a soldier, to be more than just what people expect you to be." Maya nodded, offering her a small smile. "You're capable of more than you think. Just remember, be the leader you need to be, not the one they want you to be." As Maya watched Winters walk away, she felt a sense of pride. It wasn't just the mission that had changed her. It was the realization that she was now the one passing on the lessons, the one who could inspire the next generation. Maya had become not just a soldier, but a mentor, a leader in her own right. She had fought for her place, and now she was shaping the future. For Maya, the journey was just beginning. She knew that challenges would still come, but she was no longer afraid. She had found her voice, her strength, and her place among those who fought beside her. No longer the one overlooked, Maya was now the one who would help guide others, teaching them to see what they had never imagined possible. And as she looked to the horizon, she felt a quiet confidence. The future was hers to shape.